unrest in Oregon. Another night of conflict between demonstrators and police. What the Archbishop of Portland is saying about the violence. Reversing course. An update on whether Britain will lift its coronavirus restrictions. Faith and politics. Representative Steve Scalise tells us how God performed a miracle in his life after he was shot during a baseball practice. And path to sainthood. A closer look at the miracle attributed to the founder of the Knights of Columbus. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, July 31st, 2020. Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. At the White House, President Donald Trump shows his support for police officers who have come under intense scrutiny nationwide. But support for needy Americans has hit a political roadblock. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, a busy day here at the White House. We begin with President Trump meeting with police officers earlier today. He told them Americans want protection, and his administration has their back.
President Donald Trump welcomes leaders of the National Association of Police Organizations to the White House.
We're here to discuss the unwavering support of our nation's courageous police officers and our determination to defend the safety of all Americans.
The president has been adamant in backing police officers nationwide and blasting calls for defunding.
In recent weeks, law enforcement has become the target of a dangerous assault by the radical left. The left-wing extremists have spread mayhem.
Also at the White House, Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, who has been working with Democrats on another economic aid package.
The Democrats believe that they have all the cards on their side, and they're willing to play those cards at the expense of those that are hurting.
For many Americans, rent is due tomorrow. The $600 in unemployment benefits gone. So is the moratorium on evictions.
And I want to stress that the Democrats have made zero offers over the last 3 days. Zero.
And with the presidential election just over 3 months away now, expect more mail-in voting because of the coronavirus. Warning flags from the White House on that.
Always a mail-in ballot system, mass mail-out ballots are going to be more at risk of fraud.
Even so, when November 3rd, Election Day, rolls around.
The president answered this 3 times yesterday. He said, I want the date more than anyone. I don't want to delay. I want to have the election. And in a local interview, he said, no one wants the date of the election more than me.
Also at that police roundtable, President Trump reiterated that those universal mail-in ballots would be a disaster. He said it would take days, weeks, months, or even longer to determine a winner. But he does approve of absentee ballots because those, he says, go through a process. Tracy.
Okay, thank you, Ellen. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reporting for us tonight. On Capitol Hill, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi reacted to criticism that Democrats are bickering in the ongoing pandemic aid negotiations.
We aren't bickering. We were having major policy disagreements. We don't have shared values. That's just the way it is. So it's not bickering. It's standing our ground or trying to find common ground.
Speaker Pelosi is keeping the pressure on Republicans to agree to a sweeping $3 trillion bill. Yesterday, Republican Senator Ron Johnson called Speaker Pelosi's strategy very unfortunate. And the House voted today to approve a bundle of spending bills with a price tag of $1.3 trillion. The package of 6 bills would fund most of the federal government for fiscal year 2021. The Senate is not expected to pass it. The package also includes a repeal of the Protect Life rule that prevents tax dollars from paying for abortions. Marjorie Danisfelser, president of the Susan B. Anthony list, responded, writing, "This bill is in clear violation of the historic bipartisan agreement to preserve current federal pro-life policy." A sharp rise of COVID-19 cases in Britain is forcing the Prime Minister to halt a lifting of restrictions.
We've really reduced the incidence of the virus and we've got the number of deaths down. But it can come up again. And we've seen what's happening in other European countries. So what I'm saying to people is don't lose focus, don't lose discipline, continue to observe those guidelines.
The British government is scrapping plans to let casinos, bowling alleys, and skating rinks open on Monday. The rule requiring masks in churches, shops, and museums is now extended. Leaders in Hong Kong say they are postponing highly anticipated legislative elections because a coronavirus outbreak is worsening.
确保香港特区第7届立法会选举
China's foreign ministry says Hong Kong's elections are a purely internal matter. Hong Kong's leader, Carrie Lam, announced that September's elections are being postponed for 1 year. But democracy activists say the delay is really to stop their momentum. The Islamic festival of Eid starts tonight, and this morning Muslims in Turkey gathered for Friday prayers at the Hagia Sophia Mosque in Istanbul. Hundreds came from all over Turkey to participate in Eid al-Adha, a major holiday observed by billions of Muslims. It commemorates Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son as an act of obedience to God. It has been about 2 weeks since Turkey converted the landmark Hagia Sophia from a museum to a mosque. The Hagia Sophia was originally built as an Orthodox cathedral back in the 6th century, and Christians were upset when Turkey's government converted it into a mosque. Now, the government of Syria and Russia are planning to build a replica of the historic landmark. A Greek Orthodox bishop in western Syria has approved construction of the replica. And you could read more about the history of the building at our sister publication, CatholicNewsAgency.com. An archbishop in Senegal says the country's coronavirus lockdown has strengthened the faith of his flock. In an interview earlier this week, Archbishop Benjamin Ndi says the restrictions have led to more prayer among families. Public masses are suspended in the West African country. Church leaders have decided against resuming them, even though the government eased the lockdown earlier this month. Senegal has reported nearly 10,000 cases of coronavirus. Joining us now is Father Don Bosco Anyala, editor-in-chief of ACI Africa. Father, welcome back. So good to see you. So we just heard public masses in Senegal have not resumed just yet. Can you update us on other parts of Africa and whether there are public masses?
So whereas in Senegal they have postponed, in other countries like Kenya, South Africa, and Tanzania, and other countries, they have been allowed to have masses, but with a limited number of people attending. In Kenya, for example, 100 people are allowed, keeping all the measures like social distancing, sanitizing, wearing masks, are some of the measures that have been taken for these countries where they're allowed to resume masses.
I understand ACI Africa received a message this week from a bishop in South Sudan. What did he have to say, and how are things going in that country?
It was a message from the emeritus bishop of Torit Diocese. He's 84 years old. He took the occasion of the Martyrs' Day, which was yesterday, the 30th of July, to remind the country, to call upon the people of God there to be sensitive about peace and living in harmony with each other, avoiding suspicion, avoiding tribalism, because that's where the problem is, that many tensions and conflicts and violence has been on the basis of tribe and ethnicity. So he was encouraging them to look at the lives that have been lost over many years ago, the martyrs that have shed their blood, and that they should be able to see that blood as a seed for them to keep peace, which has been elusive for many years in the country.
Well, Father, I also understand there's some good news for the faithful in Ghana. Can you tell us about that?
Well, in Ghana, there have been number of weeks when the public mass and public worship was reinstated. And the faithful turned up and realized that 1 hour of worship which was given was not really enough. And so the president, realizing that actually people are keeping the regulations and trying their best to abide by the guidelines, extended the 1 hour to 2 hours. And given that context, then in the Archdiocese of Kumasi, the Archbishop there has announced that they are going to have the pilgrimage on the solemnity of the Assumption of the Virgin Mary, which is an annual event in the Archdiocese. And so that has been received positively from what we have gathered from the faithful in that Archdiocese.
Oh, Father, thank you so much. Father Don Bosco Anyala, Editor-in-Chief of ACI Africa. Thank you again.
Thanks a lot, Tracy.
Coming up, the Archbishop of Portland gives us his view on the violent protests in that city. And Congressman Steve Scalise tells us how his faith saved his life. Another round of violence in Portland, Oregon last night. State and local officers have now taken over from U.S. agents in protecting a federal courthouse. It is part of an agreement between the Trump administration and the state's Democratic governor. However, federal agents remain on standby. Clashes between protesters and police have been going on for more than 2 months. Joining me now to talk more about the situation in Portland is Archbishop Alexander Sample, head of the Archdiocese of Portland, Oregon. Your Excellency, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's very good to be with you and all of your viewers.
Well, I know that you support what you call the well-placed outcry against the injustice of racism. However, you say the violence in Portland is no longer about fighting inequality. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, I think that with the violence that has erupted here in Portland, really the focus has been taken off of the central issue that we all need to be looking at and addressing, and that is the issue of the remnants of racism that are still very much present in our society. And as these protests began peacefully and rightfully, in my mind, I mean, we should be outraged at injustice and racism. But when it became violent and night after night after night, now it seems to be no longer about the issue of human dignity and trying to ensure the respect for the dignity of every human person, no matter what race they are. Now it's become about the violence, and it's become about this standoff between these protesters here in Portland and the federal officers, and that's all you see anymore on the news. So I'm saddened that this is a great distraction from the real issues that we need to address and really adjust ourselves to in our society.
Absolutely. And we've seen those images coming out of Portland, but seeing the videos and the pictures is really much different than actually being there. Can you describe for us what it's like living in Portland right now?
Well, thankfully, my office and my home are at some distance from the site of these protests. But on Sunday last, I made a deliberate decision to drive down during the day past the site of the protest, which is at the Mark Hatfield Federal Building here in downtown Portland. And I was absolutely depressed, quite honestly, by what I saw. The outside of the building is completely covered with some very vulgar graffiti. The building is encased in chain link fencing to protect it. There were some workers out there welding, I presume repairing parts of the fence from the protests the night before. And across from it is a park. And at that time, the young folks mostly who were protesting were camped out there. They had pretty much taken over the park. There were tents and people were cooking. It almost had a carnival-like atmosphere, quite honestly, that sadly was turning violent at night. Now, the city has cleared out those people from locating there in the park, which hopefully is going to help the situation. But it's really, it looked like something, quite honestly, that you see on the news from other countries where there's violence and rioting and unrest. It was very disheartening, very discouraging.
Yeah, indeed. And what would be your advice to the faithful on maybe constructive ways to fight racism and also in responding to the violence and the riots?
Well, I think certainly in response to the violence and the riots, you know, we don't have a lot of control over those things. So I think obviously prayer and praying really a way of the evil that really I think has in many ways settled upon some here in our city. But mainly I think we need to turn back to the discussion where this all began. And that's the issue of trying to eradicate the remnants of racism in our culture. And I think we turn to the principles of Catholic social teaching. I've been saying this, that if the whole society, quite honestly, would adopt the principles of Catholic social teaching, these problems could be worked out in time. You know, the respect for the dignity of the human person, community, emphasis on community and family, the principle of solidarity. I think these are especially the principles that we need to hold on to. But also, I've encouraged the faithful here to pick up the recent U.S. Bishop's pastoral letter on racism as something practically we can do to educate ourselves first, to read this beautiful statement, to study it, to discuss it, but then to take action. You know, it can't be just about reading and studying, because the pastoral letter moves us all to action in constructive ways, in peaceful ways. Really in the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and John Lewis, who we just laid to rest. That's the way to achieve true harmony in society and community. We need to come together and not give in to this really a political divide in our country right now. We cannot let that infect the church. We are called to unity. We are called to be the body of Christ. And I think we could have a tremendous influence if we could come together and really advocate for those principles and moral values that are so near and dear to us in our faith.
Archbishop Alexander Sample of the Archdiocese of Portland, thank you so much for your time, Your Excellency.
Thank you. Pray for us.
We will. The Catholic leaders of 3 U.S. cities want schools to reopen. Cardinal Timothy Dolan of New York, Cardinal Sean O'Malley of Boston, and Archbishop Jose Gomez of Los Angeles wrote an op-ed article in the National Catholic Register. They write, in part, helping tuition-paying families keep their Catholic and other non-government schools open this fall must be part of the larger, urgently needed plan to sustain our nation. And you can find the entire commentary from the National Catholic Register at ncregister.com. Three years ago, on a summer morning, life changed in an instant for Congressman Steve Scalise. For our series Faith and Politics, Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales sat down with the Catholic lawmaker from Louisiana as he described how God performed miracles on that faithful day.
And then, lo and behold, a shooter comes out unbeknownst to us and literally starts shooting all of us. His intention was to kill all of us on the ball field that day.
Virginia Attorney General Mark Herring later said the shooter's attack was, quote, an act of terrorism fueled by rage against Republican legislators.
When I was hit, it all happened very fast, and I surely didn't realize how bad off I was. I fell down because it came in my waist here, and immediately my legs gave out, and then I started crawling away from the gunfire.
As House Majority Whip Steve Scalise traveled with security detail, Capitol Police officers Crystal Griner and David Bailey quickly fired back.
Both were shot during the shootout and still kept going after the shooter until they took him down.
Already, Congressman Scalise tells me he was deep in prayer.
I didn't feel pain and I didn't feel fear. I felt a very calm sense that I've put this in God's hands.
The Capitol Police officers, helped by officers from the city of Alexandria, Virginia, kept the lawmakers from being sitting ducks. But the miracles were just beginning.
The only reason that not only me but everybody else on that ball field is alive today is because God was on that field performing miracles.
A bullet aimed at Mississippi Republican Trent Kelly was deflected by a chain-link fence and whizzed past him instead. Congressman Brad Winstrup of Ohio was there. The former combat surgeon used his skills to save Scalise's life.
And he put a tourniquet on that my trauma surgeon later on told me if he didn't properly prepare me, I would have never even made it to the hospital.
But Steve Scalise did make it, and he returned to Capitol Hill just over 3 months later.
I had to learn how to walk again, and God gave me the strength to do all of that, to overcome those challenges and, to not look back with bitterness, because I really don't have that. I feel just lucky, not anything else, and that's because of my strong faith.
And Congressman Scalise shared with me when he was shot, he prayed to God for some pretty heavy things, one of which was his daughter, who was 10 years old at the time. He asked God if he could spare his life so that he could one day walk her down the aisle. An inspiring story of faith. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, how the coronavirus pandemic is affecting summer plans and the travel industry. Plus, how the founder of the Knights of Columbus is one step closer to sainthood. The travel industry has been hit hard by the coronavirus. The financial losses are being felt by airlines and travel agencies, but a burden is also weighing heavy on families. Correspondent Mark Irons joins us now with that story. Mark?
Tracy, many states have their own form of travel restrictions in place, but let's just face it, summer 2020 looks nothing like last year. From beach vacations to summer camps, a lot has been canceled.
I just don't really know what summer is without Camp St. Charles.
A major part of Laura Hall's life has been formed on this summer camp shore in southern Maryland. She first met her husband John when they were counselors at this Catholic camp. They've raised their children here. Hall is the camp director at Camp St. Charles, and her family is facing a devastating financial blow. Coronavirus concerns forced them to shut down for the summer.
A lot of people told me camp was the last thing that their kids were really looking forward to. And, we're very sad to hear that we weren't going to be part of their summer.
Summer plans are changing. Trips canceled.
This is our busy season. This is when we have most of our travelers.
Instead of booking vacations, Colorado-based travel agent Donna Ivanica has spent the summer canceling them.
Basically, we don't get paid until the person takes their trip. When they cancel it or the coronavirus comes on, it puts us in a really bad state because the cash flow goes in reverse.
The Whip family from Southern California was all set to take a Hawaiian vacation when the resort they booked shut down.
Literally 2 days before we were supposed to leave.
The Hawaii Tourism Authority says visitors this June dropped by 98% compared to last year. Both Troy Witt and his wife Nora are working parents, so a summer trip with their two boys means a lot.
My wife and I made the decision a long time ago that family vacation time was really important, and we prioritized that.
The United Nations World Tourism Organization reports that this past May saw a 98% fall in international tourist numbers compared with May of last year. And we know that air travel has significantly declined. But Tracy, the travel agent I spoke with said that road trips are actually on the rise. It looks like people are also trying to get out more and enjoy the outdoors this year. Tracy.
Okay, some good news there. Thank you, Mark. Correspondent Mark Irons reporting for us tonight. And finally tonight, the Vatican announced this month that the founder of the Knights of Columbus, Father Michael McGivney, will be beatified on October 31st in Hartford, Connecticut. EWTN News correspondent Colin Flynn reports on the miracle that will bring Father McGivney one step closer to possible sainthood.
Father Michael McGivney's canonization cause started in 1996 by the Archdiocese of Hartford. In 2008, Pope Benedict XVI declared the Knights of Columbus founder venerable. Since then, the cause has been held in Rome by Dr. Andrea Ambrosi, postulator of Father McGivney's cause.
Lui è nato nel 2015, quindi adesso ha 15 anni, ha 5 anni.
Dr. Ambrosi says he has worked on hundreds of saint causes, but says this one is special because the miracle happened to an unborn child in the womb of a mother. That miracle happened in Dixon, Tennessee. Brian Coalfield is the vice postulator of the cause and was responsible for gathering evidence and conducting interviews with the family about the birth of their son, Mikey Shackle.
It was such a severe case of fetal hydrops. It was a late onset in the pregnancy. It was complicated by trisomy 19, which is Down syndrome, and also coarctation of the aorta. And the mother was given the option of aborting at 19 weeks because the doctor said, I have never seen a case this serious go on to delivery.
The parents, Dan and Michelle, opted to go ahead with the birth. After winning a trip to Rome through Dan's job, the family traveled to St. Peter's Basilica to pray for the health of their little baby. They asked Venerable Father McGivney for his intercession, and Dan promised to name the child Michael after Father Michael McGivney.
We have a case where we were told to kill that child because it wasn't expected to live, or it wasn't going to have the quality of life that society deems as quality. You know, if there was ever a baby that Father McGivney would want to help, this would be the one.
When they came back to the US, Michelle went to the doctors, and the fetal high drops had disappeared. All the doctors at Vanderbilt Hospital said something like that was absolutely incomprehensible.
Today, the child is 5 years old, was not healed of the Down syndrome. And this is an interesting case. And I said, well, you know, if we're going to go to the Vatican to propose this as a miracle through the intercession of Father McGivney, one of the questions naturally is going to be, okay, the child was healed of one condition, the serious one, high drops, but the child was not healed of Down syndrome. So when I posed that question to the parents, they looked at one another kind of quizzically, like they couldn't believe I would ask this question. And they looked and both said almost simultaneously together, we never asked God to heal from Down syndrome. We only asked to be healed from the fatal condition, which was high drops, and he was. And I said, wow, that's amazing.
The parents and the siblings joyfully welcomed little Michael, child number 13 of the large loving family. They thought this great blessing would help other children to learn compassion and unconditional love. Colin Flynn, EWTN News Nightly.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.